Welcome back to the Voiceover Talks podcast. My name is Scott Tunnix. I am a voiceover artist from the UK and creator of the Voiceover Talks podcast series. Now, when I first discovered the world of voiceover, I did what every newcomer to the industry does and spent months scouring the internet for as much information on everything to do with voiceover as I could possibly find. And one of my first main sources of information and inspiration came from a YouTube channel that was packed with so much content, not only around the technical or business side of working in voiceover, but also around the human element. It didn't sugarcoat anything, and it wasn't afraid to talk about many of the realities of working in voiceover that you won't find in a textbook or as part of a training course. And so this week, I'm very pleased to be able to welcome the man behind the channel to the show. He is so much fun to listen to and is an incredibly talented voice actor, regularly starring in the smash hit YouTube series Cartoon Hooligans. It is the fantastic Funny Guy Timmy, aka Timothy Banfield. Before I bring him on, just take a listen to this.
What? Oh no! I'm so far away from the factory! Santa's gonna kill me! Or worse, he's gonna rip my ears off and turn them into shoehorns!
My Sakurajima! I love you! Damn it! I was afraid this would happen. Humiliating myself for nothing?
Okay, children. We have arrived at the home of the glowworms.
I don't see any glowworms.
That's because it's too bright. We'll have to turn off all of our helmet lights.
Listen, Fury, this seems like big time, huge superhero kind of stuff. There's gotta be someone else you can use. What about Thor?
Off-world.
Doctor Strange?
Unavailable.
Captain Marvel?
Don't invoke her name.
Oh, I see.
Kid, are you sure about this? I mean, your last experiment didn't turn out so well, remember?
This time, I'm building an interdimensional portal generator. They're two totally different things.
This isn't fair! I should be the one getting all the glory. I was the one who made that little scrawny punk famous.
Timmy, that is absolutely insane. You have such a huge range of characters in you. And the crazy thing is, that was just a 60-second clip from over 12 minutes worth of characters and voices from your most recent animation montage. I mean, you do everything from kid voices to teens to heroes and villains, old ladies, and literally everything in between.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
I do. I have a long range, and that's mostly just from. So when I was younger, before I actually could speak, I was mimicking all noises that I heard. And the first impressions that I ever learned was Yoda, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Louis Armstrong. So my range was already getting pushed really far as a kid.
Well, even just that short sample sounds absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. To get us started then, Tim, just tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, I am a lunatic caught in a closet, padded room of my own making. The voices in my head get to come out my mouth, and people pay me to do that. That is essentially what I tell my parents when they ask, what do I do?
What an amazing way to put it.
It really is. Because, I mean, you have to be comfortable alone saying the kinds of things that you wouldn't say in public out loud using the kind of voices you don't use for conversation.
There are some great ways that I've heard people describe what they do as a voice actor, but I think that is definitely up there at the top. In addition to voiceover, I know you do on-screen acting.
Yep.
You've done stand-up comedy. You run a Let's Play gaming channel. You run your voiceover YouTube channel, and you've started doing art and animation drawing work too. Am I missing anything else? Like when do you sleep?
Well, to be honest, I actually have to make myself go to sleep because if I could choose to not sleep and just keep working, I would absolutely do that, which is very unhealthy. I'm just going to put that out there. Get your sleep. Get your 8 hours. And you just got to shut down after a while. I have a terrible habit of extending when I go to bed. I'm up later every single day. So sooner or later, I just swap to the point that I'm sleeping during the day and up all night. So I have to make myself not do that because I also do video editing that I'm trying to get more into. That I've done a little bit for clients, like doing things like Foley work and editing videos and adding sound effects and music in the background. But that's not really something that I showcase because that takes a lot of time.
Well, earlier this week, I watched a video that you posted recently on your YouTube channel about stretching yourself too thin.
Yes.
And I was just blown away by how much you have going on. And for the record, I watched that video after I'd already asked you to come on the show, in my defense. I'm just putting that out there.
And you're like, oh, no.
Well, I don't want to get in trouble if this is is like the thing that pushes you over the edge.
No. Trust me, more stressful, more busy years have happened, and I'm still doing it. There were actually periods when I actually wanted to take a break from doing voiceover and take a break from doing YouTube and take a break from doing certain things. I did have to put my stand-up comedy on hiatus, and there have been periods when I put my acting on hiatus. The comedy mostly because it was more stress than it was actually worth, especially in today's climate with people getting a little too upset over just jokes. You know, in my last few sets, I was just joking about me because that was I had like an entire 45-minute set of just jokes about me. I was like, how can I offend anyone? I'm just talking about me. And yet in front of me, a group of 5 women, I'm guessing they were drunk, just started boo, just out of nowhere.
How dare you say that about yourself?
And I'm just like, what? And they're like, you're being offensive. And I'm like, I'm just talking about me. How are you getting offended on my behalf of me mocking me? And after that, I told my agent, I was like, dude, I got to take a break. I can't keep doing this right now. I need to focus on other things. I am losing sleep. What little sleep I get already.
Well, I guess if you feel like you needed a break from stand-up, then the last year has sort of been the perfect opportunity to do that. I don't know what things are like over there in Texas, but here in the UK, after almost a year and a half now, things are only just starting to open up again.
Yeah, there are some states that have kind of like opened up with some rules, like everyone has to be a certain distance apart, the audience has to wear masks, and you can't show up if you have any kind of symptoms. But there was a period when the only thing that was available was doing like Zoom or Skype shows.
So more like sit-down comedy than stand-up.
Yeah, but it's also like, you're a stand-up comedian, you're used to that energy in the room. You're used to that feeding off that live feedback.
Right.
But then you're doing a show where there could be, I don't know, like 30 seconds of delay from one person's response, and people are freezing and glitching in front of you.
You're like, did they freeze or did they not get the joke?
No. And I had a friend who was trying to convince me to like do it because he was doing a lot of that. He does way more stand-up comedy than I do. He's like, come on, you can be my opener. I'm like, absolutely not. If anything, I will record a show and send it to you, and you can play it. But I am not doing that live. Absolutely not.
And I don't think anyone will blame you for that. So talking specifically about voiceover, I wanted to ask you how you first found out about voiceover and how you started your voiceover career, because I mentioned at the introduction to this episode that when I first started out back in 2018, your YouTube videos actually gave me the first insight into the fact that voiceover or voice acting is a thing. Like, you don't need to be a household name or an established actor or live in LA or London to work or have a real career as a voiceover artist.
Yeah.
So that was a big moment for me when I first found your channel and through that went on to realize that there was a whole industry, a whole world of voiceover out there.
It's like the underground fight club. Like,
Yeah.
nobody talks about it, nobody knows, but when you're in that crowd and you know about it, then you can go and find these opportunities.
Well, when I found that like blew my mind. So I'm curious to find out about how you first found out about voiceover and how you started out, and also at what point you were like, okay, I could make a real career out of this.
My starting point is different depending on what I refer to as voiceover and what technically qualifies. So when I first started doing voiceover was back at the time of the Nokia flip phone. Do you remember that thing? Or the Razor?
That was like 2004, 2005?
Something like that, yeah. So this was before you could just plug in your phone and, download information onto it or just download straight from the phone. They weren't smartphones. So in order to get like a special ringtone, you could go to a website and type in and text a certain number, and it would charge you through your phone service, and then you'd have a special ringtone. Well, I was doing impressions for this website where like I was doing like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, answer your phone, come on, do it now. And I was doing stuff like that, and that was technically the first I ever really did voiceover, but I had no treatment, no padding. I didn't know anything about editing. I knew nothing, but that's technically where I started. But where I actually started was when I was living in my first apartment alone, and I needed a little extra money, and a friend that I had made contact with, and his name's Philip Wilburn, and he's an amazingly talented impressionist and sweet, sweet guy who lives in LA, who used to live in Texas. And he was telling me, he was like, hey, do you know about voices.com, Voice123, all this, and Fiverr and stuff like that? He's like, you should probably start there and then work your way for an agent. And I was like, what? And so the first person I ever saw videos on setting up or talking about voiceover was Bill DeWeese. And if I remember correctly, he was the only person I could find talking about it. And there wasn't a lot covering it. He didn't really cover like how to set up your first studio. He didn't cover like which is the best mic. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't covered, but he was just covering the idea that voiceover can be done from home. And I was like, okay. So I started like doing all this on my own. I got a really cheap microphone and then I went to, voices.com, and the first 2 things I auditioned for, I got, which is unheard of. And one of them was for a video game. I don't remember. I think it was just called Frozen Heart. It was like one of those point-and-click adventure games. And I was like, oh, okay. And the second thing I auditioned for was for College Humor to do Daffy Duck. And I'd never done a Daffy Duck before. And I was like, this is the only other thing I'm seeing that I can audition for today. And I auditioned, and that day, they actually emailed me. And they're like, this is amazing. And, we want to book you. And here's the thing. They paid me a lot of money and then never used it. And I am so upset. I'm so livid because I'm like, where is it? So I have the receipt showing that they paid me and they hired me, but the video was never done. There's no footage of it. But after that, I started taking it seriously and started to work out these ideas on my own. And it wasn't until I moved to Austin that I really started to think about treatment. And the thing that I had to go on was pictures of other studios. So I saw the foam on the wall, and then I saw other people doing videos talking about this kind of foam and that kind of foam. And there was a little bit of research. And so the first, VoiceOver Day vlog that I did was me just wanting to archive my journey and how it would grow. And I thought it was interesting considering I didn't see a lot of people doing that kind of stuff. Now you see that all over the place. Now you see a lot of people covering how to do voiceover, how to get into voiceover, but they kind of just cover the basics. I wanted to cover as much as I could think of because there's a lot of questions that I have, a lot of questions that other people have, and some questions that people don't even know that they have. And hopefully I stumble on those as I go down the list.
Well, that's really interesting to hear you talk about that because just talking about your YouTube videos for a moment, something that I think that you do really, really well is in a lot of your voiceover videos on your channel, you put a really insightful and thought-provoking counter view to a lot of the preconceived notions or the industry rules that seem to be out there. Yeah. You should never, ever self-produce a demo. You should avoid pay-to-play sites at all cost. You need to train for at least a year before you even think about taking on real work. I mean, these are all common statements given to people new in the industry, and I see these posted a lot on various forums and groups.
Oh, all over the place, especially if it's those Facebook. Yeah,
absolutely. But had I followed those rules, there is no way that I would have been in a position to quit my day job, which was a well-paid corporate position in local government, and pursue voiceover as a full-time job 2 years after I started out.
Well, congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
That deserves a round of applause from your audience.
Oh, thank you, Tim. So my question to you is, what are some of the common pieces of advice that you see get bounded around that you don't necessarily agree with, and why?
Probably the ones, they're going to be the ones that are the most persistent or the most prolific, and that is the idea of don't go to the pay-to-plays or don't do Fiverr. I can kind of agree with the whole pay-to-plays in some aspects because you are putting down a lot of money at first. They used to be not that much for, monthly payments. I think when they started, they were like $20 a month, and that's totally fine, especially considering the lowest that you could make was $100. So as long as you make 1 gig a month, you've paid for 5 months. So that was, reasonable. But then they went for, doing a year, and it's like $600 to $1,200. And then they had like levels of like, there's the amateur pro and, super pro or whatever, where you get more benefits or you get noticed faster or stuff like that. And that's where I kind of have the issue with those kinds of websites, that they've basically created a class system and the idea of like, well, if you're looking for voiceover, why would you go to the amateur section? Why wouldn't you just go for the pros, especially if they're going to be charging the same amount? So that one I can kind of get why the pay-to-plays do kind of blur the industry, especially how it should be operated and stuff like that. However, when it comes to Fiverr, I don't really feel like any of the criticisms towards Fiverr are founded anymore. When it first started out, you could only charge $5. And yes, there were tons of people that started on Fiverr that were, I'll say anything for any use for $5. And yes, they were garbage services and they were taking a dump on the industry. I get that. But now you can charge anything. You can charge pretty much anything you want. And Fiverr has tailored the website towards, they used to only tailor towards the people that were buying. Now they've actually tailored it very much so towards the people that are selling. And they give you tons of options. And I've gotten SAG work off Fiverr. And I've been paid SAG rates off Fiverr.
There's a video, and I think it might be Bill DeWeese whose video it was, and he's talking about there are working voiceover artists making six-figure salaries purely working on Fiverr.
Right. Yes. A couple reasons. Number one, if you type in voiceover, now this may depend on your region and, where you are, but if you type in voiceover...
Oh, they dominate SEO, don't they?
Yeah. If you type in voiceover, one of the first things you're going to see is Fiverr. It's normally going to be Fiverr, voices.com, and then you'll see other things like Bidalgo and, but Fiverr is normally number one or number two on the list. And Fiverr itself is a search engine. So a client searching for something, they can go in and they can type in what it is they're looking for. They can type in, I'm looking for female with a Southern accent, for animation. They can type all that kind of stuff in and it'll give them a list. And it does make it convenient and easy, which is one of the reasons that they have been marketing the crap out of their own website. And yeah, it's really easy to get seen doing voiceover and to get work. I know a lot of people have a problem with it, the fact that they take 20%. I was like, yeah, so what is an agent? What's the difference? The only difference is you get to communicate with the client themselves and try to eliminate any confusion. Anytime I go through my agent for any work, acting or stand-up comedy, I always have to ask them, and it takes them a day to get that information back to me. I'm just private messaging a client now doing voiceover through Fiverr and other websites, and I can get the information immediately, which makes it so much better.
And the last year has been a great example in how there's been a huge shift towards digital marketplaces, so not just for voiceover, but across a whole range of industries and services.
Right.
Just look at Amazon essentially replacing the high street. Look at Netflix replacing the movie rental industry. You've got the likes of Spotify, which has completely changed the music industry and has essentially almost put an end to direct music sales entirely. And these were industries that had been around for 100 years or more. And in just the last 10 years alone, due to the rise of digital marketplaces, they've either been drastically changed or made completely obsolete. And it's a similar shift with voiceover. The fact that a client can now post an audition directly on a pay-to-play site or can literally type in what they're looking for and instantly be presented with a whole list of options. For many clients, it's a much easier and faster process. So it sort of feels like to me that, yes, there are a lot of people out there who are very much against these pay-to-play sites or voiceover marketplaces, but unless you change your attitude towards them or adapt to how the industry is changing or evolving, and not just around voiceover, but technology in general,
right?
Just like the thousands of now empty high street shops, you're going to be left behind.
Yes, that is a very, very true, very accurate statement. There has been this big push. I'm not going to name names. I know why they're saying the things that they're saying. I get their point of view. But there's a lot of them that actually have been suing and trying to get rid of all these websites. Voices.com, Voice123, Fiverr. They've been trying to get rid of them.
As in shut them down?
Yeah, actively trying to get rid of them. I don't know what basis they're making these lawsuits or allegations, but they're trying to discourage people from joining them. When it comes to joining these websites, which one to join or should you join, again, it's really a person-by-person basis. It's really if you live in a big city and you're not that far from a studio, yeah, get an agent. You should always try to get an agent regardless. There's tons of opportunities that are available only through agents and managers and agencies that you're probably not going to get through Fiverr. A lot of bigger studio work. But generally speaking, 99% of the work that's out there is not going to be through major studios. It's not going to be through SAG. It's not going to be through the union. It's not going to be through any of that. Or what do y'all have in the UK? I know it's not SAG. What is it?
We have Equity in the UK.
Equity, that's what it was. There's more opportunity that's not in those fields because when people think voiceover, they just think anime, cartoon, video game, and that's pretty much it. That is a minuscule fraction of what voiceover actually covers. Voiceover covers, doing radio spots, doing promos, Facebook, social media, doing voice messaging, greeting, impressions, or independent video games that are normally going through Steam or just through like the Apple Store. There's more opportunity in those areas. You're going to work with more individuals than you are going to be working with studios. I actually had I don't really like to get into arguments, but I did have a debate with someone. I'm not going to name their name, but they were someone who was kind of mad that I was telling people that, that they could work offline and not go through agencies and unions. And they were talking about SAG rates, and I'm like, well, not everyone can pay SAG rates. Like, the individual company that's hiring voiceover can't. And their excuse was like, well, then they just shouldn't have a company. And I was like, that's really rude. That's a rude way of looking at it. No, I refuse to accept that, considering, it's supply and demand. Right. The fact that everything is easier to make, it's easy to make a video game, it should, and it's easy to record from home, then the financial transfer should go down as well. Again, depending on the size and scope of the project.
Absolutely. I had the same conversation with a guest I had on the show last week, and we were just talking about the fact that there are so many new startups now, like we said before,
right.
And a lot of these companies, they might have only spent £1,000 or $1,000 in their entire company setup so far. And for a lot of purposes, people who create YouTube channels, they're not going to be paying hundreds of dollars per voiceover for narration for a YouTube video. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed to use a professional voiceover artist or someone who is good at voiceover
right.
in their videos.
Right. I will say, however, on the flip side of what I said earlier, there is a caveat to that statement. And that is the fact that because you're working with a lot of private and independent companies, a lot of them, because they're outside of major industries, don't know what voiceover should be worth. And so those are normally where a lot of the confusion and frustration of, well, I should just be able to pay you $5. All you're doing is standing in front of a microphone and talking. Those kind of statements. It's just like, no, you don't understand. You run down the cost of everything in the studio. You run down the electricity just to use the studio, the cost of internet, the cost of service on these different websites. All this adds up, and you have to meet those costs with your service, and that's what I'm charging. You want to go for someone else who's less? By all means, go for it. That's the benefit of the online market. If I'm too much, then go for someone who can do a similar service that's more within your price range. You have every right to do that. But don't argue with me over what I should charge. And
Absolutely.
So I think that's part of where a lot of the more, not necessarily heated, but the more disagreement on whether or not the independent industry and market should operate the way it does.
That's a really good point. And it sort of leads on to my next question, which sort of jumps back a bit. But what's the one thing you wish you had known when you began your career in voiceover?
Oh, my goodness.
Like, if you could go back now and tell yourself when you first started out one piece of advice.
One piece of advice. It would probably have something to do with, well, one of the things that anytime I do coaching with people, anytime someone's looking for help, they're like, hey, I don't know what it is, what's holding me back. What I'll do is I'll send them 4 scripts that each have 2 characters on them. And it's a wide range of emotions and delivery and styles and personalities to really just gauge their raw talent. I would love to do that with the old me, and I'm sure the old me would have made all, if not more, mistakes than the average person that I coach. And one of the things is yelling. You have to actually yell instead of not of course yell to the point that it just rips your throat, but there's loud projection. And, a lot of people when they're first starting out are very shy and, very hesitant to actually raise their voice, whether it's because they're embarrassed, even though they're alone, or they don't want to disturb the people in the house. And they're still very nervous about it.
Right.
And so they'll end up doing this kind of like whisper yelling, no! And that's not yelling. That's not what the script says. That's not what the character would want. That's not what the character would do. And so that's probably the kind of stuff that, I was doing. I'm scared to go back and listen to my old demos, even though I have them.
It can be really fun, though, going back so far and listening to some of the really old stuff you've done. What's so great about many of your videos on voiceover in your channel is that they are often just really raw. Like, you're not afraid to open up about the realities or some of the harsh realities of working as a voice actor. There's a lot of sugar-coated content out there when it comes to voiceover.
Oh my gosh.
Particularly on social media, where people only tend to post their successes or content that just shows how amazing the job is, which a lot of the time it is. It really, really is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it can be stressful, it can be lonely, it can be demoralizing and difficult in so many ways. The fact that you address a lot of those harsh realities in your videos is really amazing, and it's what makes your content so good. And so I wanted to ask you, for you, what's the hardest thing about working as a voiceover artist, and how do you work to overcome that?
The two things I would probably say that are the hardest for me, one is my dyslexia, which is horrible, and which every single time I tell them, like, you're a voice actor, you read for a living. How do you even function? And, well, certain things are harder for me to read than others. Obviously, doing things like medical narration or long-form narration are going to be harder for me. But when it comes to like doing character dialogue, as long as I understand the character, I can kind of work my way through the dialogue, and I kind of guess where they're going. As well as the fact that, I can do shorter takes or do smaller segments and then just cut out the bad takes, as opposed to doing long form, which is pretty much, you just got to do the whole thing. And so that's murder. So that I don't really get a lot of that kind of work, and I don't market that kind of stuff. But if a client comes to me and asks me to, we like your voice, if it's reasonable, then I'll take it, but I don't normally like market it. So dyslexia is a pretty big one. And it's probably something I'm going to be struggling for years. It's also something that's held me back from getting agents. There's been a couple times when I've had one-on-one meetings with agents evaluating me, whether or not they should add me to their roster, and they've found out that I was having problems reading the dialogue, doing a cold read, and they were like, are you dyslexic? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, unfortunately, you're going to be doing a lot of cold reads. This may not work out.
Wow.
And, it's been tough, but like, I totally understand. I totally get it. It doesn't hurt my feelings too much. The other thing would be the fact that again, because I'm a real big critic of myself, I'm really terrible at marketing myself. So even if I've done a project that is great and that I'm really proud of, I will hardly ever mention it. And so a lot of people don't really see the kind of work that I've done. In fact, the animated showcase reel was kind of like the first time I'd done something like that in years. And it was really hard for me because I was like, I'm not proud of any of this. And part of that is kind of just the way that I was raised. It's not that I wasn't encouraged. There was just really, really high bars and standards set. I also always had an older brother who was like the perfect older brother. Now he's not so perfect. And so I was always trying to like live up to his kind of skills, especially when it came to art. He's an amazing hand-drawn artist, and I knew that I could never match him. And so I would only focus on doing storyboards or concept art or scribbles or basic rough stuff. But I would never, I never got good at doing finalized art. Just because I saw that I would probably never be good at that. Nowadays, I've kind of like, all right, I need art in my life on some level, so I need to kind of get better at it, but I'm never proud of that kind of work that I do. So those are the two things I'd say I struggle with.
Well, I can say firsthand that some of the art that you've been posting on your Instagram is incredible, so you should definitely feel proud of that. I wanted to also mention, because I saw there's a commercial I think you did, like an on-screen thing for, is it apartments.com?
Yes.
With the onion milk?
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
That is amazing.
So
I was literally in tears watching that. And you're in tears cutting onions in the video, but it looks amazing as well. It's so good.
Oh, short story about that one. That was not what I wanted as far, like, I auditioned for like 2, and there was one role that I understood and liked, and I thought it was funny, and it was this like guy like in his underwear and trying to iron a shirt quickly because like his utensils exploded and he's getting ready for an interview, and I was like, I like that one. That one's funny. There's panic, and I was like, you have frizzy hair, and he's like, like he's trying to iron real quick, and I was like, I like that one. And then I got the onion milk one, but my agent didn't tell me which one I got, and so I'm like, yes, I got the one that I think I got. And it is until I'm doing the fitting, and I'm like, this doesn't seem right. This clothes doesn't seem right.
Why are they putting trousers on me?
And the lady literally, she's like, you don't know? And I was like, yeah. She's like, your agent didn't tell you? He's like, he didn't tell me shit. And so I go, she goes, oh yeah, you're onion milk guy. And I'm like, damn it. And so I was, I did not enjoy that, but I'm glad other people did. That's the only saving grace.
It's fantastic. Honestly, I watched it about 15 times. It's absolutely hilarious. So if you check out Timmy's channel, check out that video. It's hilarious. What is your and I know you said it's difficult, but if you had to choose something, what is your proudest voiceover achievement or the project that you've worked on to date that you've been most proud of?
That's interesting. I would say there's probably a handful. I think a good number of the Cartoon Hooligans videos I'm pretty proud of. Anytime I do Deadpool or the Joker for Cartoon Hooligans, I'm pretty proud of that. Just because first time I did Deadpool, I don't think they originally wanted me to do Deadpool. I was like, please let me do Deadpool. And I sent them like an audition, basically. And they were like, yeah, no, we'll do that. And but one of the gigs that was basically SAG that I did was also doing Deadpool, and it was for Marvel. It was just for a commercial. It wasn't too big a deal, but the fact that I was sent an NDA that had Disney and Marvel at the top, I was like, well.
Frame that bad boy.
Yeah. Well then. And at first they wanted me to do a Ryan Reynolds version of Deadpool. And I was like, I don't really do a Ryan Reynolds. I'll try, but can I also do my own version? And they were like, okay, go ahead and send that at the end audition. And I did, and they were like, we're going to go with your version. And they liked it, and they paid me well, and it was a lot of fun. And after that, I was like, I love doing Deadpool. I never really did Deadpool before. I never really thought of doing Deadpool, but the more I've gotten to do it, the more fun it's been.
And if anyone hasn't seen Cartoon Hooligans, definitely worth checking out on YouTube. My next question, and this is a question that I like to ask all of my guests. It's a bit of a recurring theme on the show. And that's, do you have any really embarrassing moments in your career? Hopefully ones where you can look back on and laugh now, but that at the time were like head-in-hand moments for you.
Oh, my goodness. For voiceover, not that much. For acting, there's more of that than I would ever want to admit. Stand-up comedy was constantly embarrassing, and just me being on stage telling a joke and going, to silence. As far as voiceover, not that much. Mostly just because if there's ever really like a mistake or an error that I make, a lot of the times it's going to be my dyslexia, and I just got to do a retake. My best clients understand that I have that problem, and they're like, yeah, you just messed up this line. You can fix that. That'd be cool. So it's not that embarrassing. There's been some roles that I have done. Okay, now that I think about it really hard and have brought the suppressed memories to the surface, there are a series of animated movies, and I can't remember the guy, but some of them are on my IMDb. Some of the better ones are on my IMDb. So there's this one guy, and he's an independent. He's making his own content. He's doing his thing. But he kind of shucks out a lot of films really quickly that may or may not be at the highest quality. And he basically hired me to do 7 of them, and he wanted me to do like 5 characters per script. One of the most embarrassing is, and I actually want to watch it because it's cringeworthy hilarious. It's me doing Donald Trump, who is a clone in the future who lives on Mars after the Illuminati aliens have taken over the planet. I just want you to think about everything I've said for a second. Really let that sink in. And the description was half Snake Plissken, half Donald Trump. That's what was told to me.
Come on, let me hear it.
I don't remember any of the lines. But it was like, Donald Trump doing this. This is basically how I did it. Yeah, get off my planet, scum. It's so stupid. The trailer is out. I think it's literally Trump versus the Illuminati. It's on IMDb. I think it's on Amazon. The trailer is on YouTube. Go find it if you want to. It's probably the funniest, dumbest thing I've done.
We've got a backlog of content to get through after this now. Are there any misconceptions or common misconceptions or myths about working as a voiceover that you'd like to debunk?
Yes. That it's easy, that it's highly profitable. It can be, but for the majority, and I mean like the strong majority, like 90%, it's not going to replace a day job as far as financially, at least not at first, not for a long time. Voiceover is very, not necessarily Wild West, but it's very inconsistent.
Yes.
It really kind of depends on the market and the areas that you're in. So there are always these peaks and valleys. It can be profitable, but don't expect it to be. People sometimes think of voiceover as like a get-rich-quick kind of thing, and those who go into voiceover with that idea should be weeded out and should get no work, because it isn't, and this is not a business. This is not a business.
Yes, absolutely. You cannot be doing this if it's for the money. You have to absolutely love what you do, because you'll spend days and days, hours and hours auditioning for stuff. There is a lot of rejection, and even the best voice actors will still have to deal with a lot of rejection. And to be strong enough to deal with that mentally fundamentally, you have to really love what you're doing. You can't be there for a paycheck.
Right. Take, for example, another website that I get a lot of or do a lot of auditions on is castingcall.club. It's a really fun, all animation, all video game audition-based website. And I think I've done maybe 80 auditions, and I've landed 6 roles. So, that's kind of my average. And I think I did 40 auditions on Twitter and landed 2 roles. So that's kind of more or less what you should expect. Not starting out, you're probably going to be looking at more like 1 out of 100, depending on the quality and how long you've been doing this and how comfortable you are. But even as you get better at doing it, even if you're really, really good at doing animation, doing voices, doing acting, do not expect to land every single role. In fact, do not expect to land the majority of them.
And it sort of leads on to the next question, actually, which is, what advice do you have for anyone who may be interested in getting into voiceover work, particularly around character, animation, gaming voices, or, advice for people who might have dabbled in VO but are really keen to take things to the next level?
So the area that people want to get into, and I understand it's incredibly fun if done right, is animation and video game. When people think voiceover, that's like the first thing that comes to their mind. You're going to want to pursue that. It is the most fun. It can make a good amount of money. But I would definitely suggest that if you're not comfortable on stage, if you're not good at improv, and you've never done acting, then probably look to those things first. Go to your local theater, see if you can do a couple plays, because if you can get really comfortable in front of a lot of people and look like an idiot on stage and not feel embarrassed, you're going to feel way more comfortable in a studio, behind a mic. Because there's actually a phenomenon, I think it's like record pause, where you hit record, but you pause, where you just freeze up and you don't know how to get the first words out of your mouth. And that happens to a lot of people that get into voiceover, just start into voiceover. And you want to be so comfortable that, everything is just mute to you. You're in the headspace of the character. You're able to think like them, and improv and stage acting and acting in general is going to help you out a lot. And for me, I started out in acting and comedy and doing puppetry and stuff like that before I even got into doing voiceover, which helped me with that. The business side is the part that I struggle the most. As far as the acting, that was normally pretty easy for me. But that's what I would suggest is improv, stage acting, just get used to embarrassing yourself comfortably before getting behind a microphone.
Because you can hear when people are holding something back in their voice. It's very, very obvious.
Like that screaming thing I was talking about.
Yes, absolutely.
Also, you'll also hear a lot of people that deliver lines basically the same way, which is another thing that I test people on with the 4 scripts that I send them, is they'll deliver the same line the same way, different characters, different emotions, but they'll always have the same kind of cadence and pause and spacing. And every single character, every single scene requires a different level of energy, a different volume, and a different pattern and rhythm and all this kind of stuff. And you need to know how to interpret that on the page. And part of that is going to be very, very comfortable. The less comfortable you are, the more reserved you're going to be. Any director, producer, anyone looking for voiceover would rather you be able to do more than less. If you can do more, they can always reel you back in.
Which is always going to be a lot easier than trying to push someone to a level that they are either not comfortable with or just aren't able to reach. One final question. Again, it's another question that I like to ask all of my guests on the show. What voiceover goals have you set yourself for the coming year?
Oh, that is great. That's actually one of my favorite topics to cover. Thanks for saving them for the last one. I'm going to start with this. Every voice actor needs to set a 1, a 5, and a 10-year goal. And basically, it can be written down or it can just be stuff that you have memorized in your head. It's always good to write it down. Now, the 10-year goal is probably not going to change too much, and those are more dreams. Those are things that are not easily obtainable, but are things that you do want to have at some point in time. The 5-year is stuff that you're working towards that may be a little bit difficult, but it's not entirely undoable. And the 1 year is stuff that's stressful that you have to get done, stuff that you really need to get done in order to even get close to the other ones. And the 1 year goal is always going to change. For me, one of the things that's on my 10-year that really, I keep wanting to move to my 5-year, but it realistically cannot be moved to the 5-year just yet, is to actually own my own studio to do dubbing and to do voiceover with other voice actors. And everything that I've been working towards learning, pursuing has been towards the goal of having a studio that I can actually, work with other voice actors in. I love the idea, especially as an actor and as an improv artist, I love the feedback of other voice actors. And I want a room that I can have multiple in there to record an entire show. I've, in the past, gotten, I think, 3 emails and requests to be the dubbing studio for a couple shows. One of them was for the Yoda Chronicles, the Lego TV show.
Okay.
It was a company in India that was doing the animation that was looking for the dubbing studio. And they had approached me thinking that I had more voice actors in my roster and thought that I had a full dubbing studio. And that was before I moved into this larger space. And I had to be honest, I had to tell them, I was like, unfortunately, I don't have a studio to actually bring in all these voice actors to record. I could audition myself or I could do them one at a time, but I don't really have that kind of studio. And they appreciated my honesty. They thanked me for the honesty. And they said if there was any auditioning, they would let me know. Nothing ever came of that. But ever since then, and that was probably like 5 years ago, it's been a goal of mine to try to get to that point, try to get to a point where I can do that kind of stuff because I enjoy directing. I enjoy writing. I enjoy editing, art, animation. To have a studio where I could do all of that stuff, and even create my own content and make my own content would be an absolute dream. It's been a dream since I was 6, and it's always going to be in my 10-year goal, hopefully not forever.
What an awesome goal. That does sound like the dream. And it's also, like you said, the fact that you can indulge yourself in so many different creative areas is amazing because even just doing voiceover, if voiceover was all you were doing, you'd get sick of it after a while.
Yes, and I have.
Exactly. So, being able to experiment and indulge in all those other creative outlets, to be able to do all of that together in your own studio would be amazing.
Also, if you're someone who's ADHD, like I am, hopping between certain things will keep your energy going, but still at the same time keep you productive. Because sooner or later, if you do just one thing, you're going to lose focus, you're going to lose interest. But if you're hopping between things and getting a little bit done on each thing at a time, outside of course, what you need to do, you need to focus on the stuff that you need to do. But when you don't need to do something at that time, if you want to just hop between stuff periodically, sometimes I'll have weeks where I just do writing, and then the following week I don't want to do any writing. And then I'll just do art. And if I don't want to do any art, then I'll do editing or whatever. And so it keeps you productive at the same time of not, having you bored at any point in time.
Timmy, thank you so much for coming on the show to speak with me tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
And it's been so much fun talking with you. To anyone listening, I cannot recommend enough getting on YouTube and checking out Tim's channel. It's FunnyGuyTimmy. It's all one word, right?
Yep, all one word.
Whether you're starting out or if you've been doing it for years, I guarantee that you will find so many insightful topics and videos related to voiceover and voice acting, so make sure you check it out. Timmy, thanks so much, and I really hope we can catch up again soon because this has been absolutely fantastic.
My pleasure. It was fun. I love, obviously, sharing my thoughts. If you've seen my, YouTube videos, you know that I like to, just unload my brain. So this was right up there.
Well, yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me to watch you unload your brain and then collect up all those little thoughts. So, yeah, thank you so much, Timmy.
My pleasure.
That was the incredibly talented Timothy Banfield, all the way from Austin, Texas, with some great stories and advice, particularly for anyone who works in or is interested in working in character voices or animation. Make sure you check out his YouTube channel, and to find out more about his work or to contact him directly, visit www.tbvo.net or through Instagram and Twitter via @FunnyGuyTimmy. Joining me next week on the show is multi-award-winning voiceover artist and winner of Male Voiceover Artist of the Year for 2 years running at the UK One Voice Awards in London, despite quite literally living on the other side of the planet. It is New Zealand's finest, Toby Ricketts. So make sure you don't miss next week's show by subscribing to the Voiceover Talks podcast series, where there's a brand new episode released every single week. That's all for this week. Thank you so much for listening. For more information about the series, you can visit voiceovertalks.com, and to ask questions, join in with the discussions, and find out more about each week's guest, please consider joining the brand new Voiceover Talks Facebook group, which is just Voiceover, all one word, Talks on Facebook. And I'll see you next time.